Welcome to Whispering Ages. Tonight, we step into the heart of time itself, into a place where every clock stopped at midnight and a man's heartbeat stopped with it. In this chilling tale, the clockmaker's shadows, Hercule Poirot and Miss Jane Marple reunite to face a mystery that defies logic and conscience alike. A village frozen in time, a craftsman obsessed with perfection, and a murder that ticks beneath the surface. If you love dark mysteries, stories that whisper between logic and madness, then you are exactly where you belong. Before we begin, make sure you subscribe to Whispering Ages, because each week we unravel another forgotten crime, another secret the shadows try to hide. And I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Who do you think the killer is before the truth is revealed? Now, sit back and listen closely, because in Greythorne, time doesn't just pass, it watches. Picture a village where time itself has stopped, where every clock face is frozen at the same impossible moment, where a brilliant clockmaker lies dead, his hand pierced by the very gears he spent a lifetime perfecting. This is Greythorne, a place where murder doesn't just take a life, but stops time itself. Tonight, we witness something unprecedented, the only collaboration between two of literature's greatest detectives. Hercule Poirot, the Belgian genius who believes in order and method, and Miss Jane Marple, the quiet spinster who sees evil lurking in the most ordinary places. Welcome to The Clockwork Murder. Part 1, When Time Stopped. The Night of the Stopped Clocks. Our story begins on a fog-drenched autumn night in 1935, in the village of Greythorne, an ancient hamlet nestled between the Yorkshire moors and the cold North Sea. Greythorne is known for three things: its medieval clock tower that dominates the skyline, its bitter coastal winds, and Alaric Venn, the finest clockmaker in all of England. At precisely midnight, the church bell begins to toll. In homes throughout the village, people pause to listen. Mrs. Agatha Tressel, the sharp-tongued postmistress, winds her mantel clock one final time before bed. Sir Edmund Whitby, the local magistrate, checks his gold pocket watch with trembling hands. He has much on his mind tonight. Young Thomas Hale, the clockmaker's apprentice, removes his wristwatch and places it carefully on his nightstand, just as his master taught him. The bell tolls 12 times. Then silence falls over Greythorne. But in Alaric Venn's workshop at the edge of the village, something extraordinary is happening. The old clockmaker sits at his workbench, surrounded by hundreds of timepieces, each ticking away at different hours, a symphony of mechanical precision that has been his life's work. Tonight, however, Venn is not alone. A visitor has arrived at this late hour. Someone unexpected. Someone Venn knows well enough to unlock his door after midnight, well enough to offer tea from the pot he's just brewed. They sit across from each other in the lamplight, surrounded by the endless ticking of clocks. The conversation is tense. Venn's hands tremble as he pours the tea. He speaks of conscience, of duty, of terrible secrets that must be revealed. His visitor listens calmly, too calmly, and accepts the offered cup with a gloved hand. They drink together in heavy silence. Then, quite suddenly, Alaric Venn clutches his chest. His face contorts in agony. The teacup crashes to the floor, shattering into porcelain shards. He realizes, in that horrible moment, what has been done to him. Gasping, dying, he stumbles toward his workbench and grasps at the elaborate brass mechanism he's been building. A master clock designed to control every timepiece in Greythorne. With his final strength, Venn pulls a lever. Throughout the village, a mechanical click echoes through walls and floorboards. And then, impossibly, every clock in Greythorne stops. Every single one. The mantel clock in Mrs. Trestle's parlor, Sir Edmund's pocket watch, Thomas Hale's wristwatch on the nightstand, the great church bell tower, all frozen at precisely 12:03 a.m. Alaric Venn collapses across his workbench, his hand impaled on the exposed gears of his own creation. Blood pools beneath brass springs and copper wire. His pocket watch dangles from his waistcoat chain. Its hand stopped forever at 12:03. The visitor stands in a sudden, deafening silence. No ticking, no mechanical heartbeat, just death and stillness. They work quickly now, arranging the scene with careful precision. Venn's hand is positioned just so. Tools are adjusted. And most importantly, watches are switched. Venn's own timepiece replaced with another identical one. A sleight of hand that will prove crucial. By the time the visitor slips out into the night, Greythorne is a village where time has died along with its master clockmaker. The morning after, dawn breaks over Greythorne with an eerie quality. The villagers wake to a profound wrongness they can't quite identify at first. Then they notice their clocks have stopped, not just one or two, but every timepiece in the entire village, all frozen at 12:03 a.m. Mrs. Trestle is the first to raise the alarm, of course. As postmistress, she considers it her duty to know everything that happens in Greythorne. She rushes through the streets in her dressing gown, knocking on doors, spreading the impossible news. The clocks have stopped, all of them, at the exact same moment. By mid-morning, an even more terrible discovery is made. The rector's wife, bringing fresh scones to old Alaric Venn as she does every Thursday, finds the workshop door unlocked. Inside, she finds a scene of horror. The greatest clockmaker in England dead at his bench, his hand grotesquely impaled on clock gears, surrounded by his silent, frozen timepieces. Sir Edmund Whitby, as magistrate, is summoned immediately. He arrives pale and shaking, whether from shock or some other cause. No one can quite tell. He examines the body with Dr. Leonard Bexley, the village physician, a trusted man who has served Greythorne for 15 years. Dr. Bexley's diagnosis is swift and certain. Heart attack. Natural causes. Poor Alaric had been complaining of chest pains for weeks. The stop clocks? Merely a bizarre coincidence. Perhaps some final spasm triggered the mechanism. These things happen with the elderly. Nothing suspicious here. Sir Edmund. Nothing at all. But Sir Edmund is not so easily satisfied. He has sent an urgent telegram to London, to a man he once hired years ago to investigate a delicate matter. The telegram reads simply, "The clocks have gone mad. Please come at once." Whitby. That telegram reaches Hercule Poirot at his London flat as he's carefully trimming his magnificent mustaches. The detectives arrive. Hercule Poirot arrives in Greythorne that same afternoon on the 3:17 train from London. Or rather, what would have been 3:17 if the station clock were still working. He steps onto the platform, immaculate in his three-piece suit, despite the journey, his patent leather shoes gleaming, every hair in place. He surveys the frozen clock face on the station tower with intense interest. To Poirot, disorder is an abomination, and here, in Greythorne, order itself has been murdered. Sir Edmund meets him at the station, clearly agitated. As they drive through the village in Edmund's motor car, Poirot observes everything with his sharp green eyes. The villagers gathered in worried clusters. The clock tower looming overhead, its hands permanently fixed at 12:03. The anxiety that hangs over Greythorne like the autumn fog. But Poirot is not the only detective to arrive in Greythorne that day. Miss Jane Marple has been staying at the rectory for the past week, visiting her niece who recently married the rector. She is the picture of an elderly spinster. White hair neatly pinned, sensible shoes, a knitting bag always at hand. She had planned a quiet country visit, perhaps some gardening, certainly some good gossip over tea. Instead, she finds herself at the center of a murder investigation. Miss Marple has a unique gift. She sees the darkness in people because she's seen it before, in the small village of St. Mary Mead, where she's lived all her life. She knows that evil doesn't announce itself with thunder and lightning. It arrives wearing a friendly smile, offering to help with the washing up, asking how your garden grows. And she knows, from the moment she sees Alaric Venn's body, that this was no natural death. The meeting. Poirot and Miss Marple encounter each other at the workshop that evening. Sir Edmund has granted Poirot access to examine the scene, and Miss Marple has accompanied the rector's wife, who is still quite shaken from her discovery. They recognize each other immediately. Years ago, they had crossed paths on a train journey where a theft had occurred, a case that neither had solved to their complete satisfaction, though each had their own theories. There had been a mutual respect, but also a certain professional rivalry. Monsieur Poirot, Miss Marple says with a polite nod, her blue eyes twinkling behind wire-rimmed spectacles. Mademoiselle Marple. Poirot responds with a small bow. It appears we are both drawn to the same puzzle. Indeed, though I suspect we may solve it quite differently. Perhaps, but the truth, mademoiselle, has only one face. They regard each other for a moment, these two brilliant minds, so different in method yet so similar in their dedication to justice. An unspoken agreement passes between them. They will work separately, but toward the same end. The game is afoot. Examining the scene, Poirot begins his investigation with characteristic precision. He measures distances with a tape measure he produces from his pocket. He examines angles. He studies the position of every tool on Venn's workbench with the intensity of an artist studying a masterpiece. The workshop is a marvel of organized chaos. Hundreds of clocks line the walls and shelves, all stopped at different times, except for one, a large brass timepiece frozen at exactly 12:03, its mechanism jammed with something golden. Poirot leans closer with his magnifying glass. Its hair, a lock of golden hair, deliberately wound into the gears. On the workbench, tools are arranged with excessive precision, every screwdriver lined up by size, every gear sorted by diameter. This is the work of a meticulous mind, a man who lived by order, except for one tool, a screwdriver lying at an odd angle, its handle smeared faintly with oil and something darker, blood. Poirot photographs this with his mind, filing away every detail. Venn's body has been removed, but Poirot studies a chalk outline, the bloodstains on the wood, the position of the impaled hand. He reconstructs the death scene in his imagination. Venn stumbling, reaching for the mechanism, pulling the lever that would stop all the clocks. Why? A dying message? A final act of revenge? Most intriguingly, Poirot discovers Venn's ledger, tucked beneath a stack of repair orders. The last entry, written in the clockmaker's shaky hand, reads, "The clock must not chime tomorrow. Midnight remembers." What clock? What does midnight remember? Poirot's little gray cells begin to work. Meanwhile, Miss Marple takes a different approach entirely. She sits in the rectory parlor, accepting tea and sympathy from the rector's wife, listening to gossip that flows as freely as the tea itself. This is where Miss Marple excels, in the comfortable spaces where people let their guards down. The rector's wife had noticed something odd when she found the body. There were 2 teacups on the tray beside Venn's workbench. 2 cups, but Venn lived alone. and the tin label for visitors was missing a biscuit. Van was particular about such things, always offer refreshment to guests. So Van had a visitor that night, someone he knew well enough to serve tea, someone he trusted. Miss Marple also learns, through gentle questioning, that Thomas Hale, the apprentice, had unusually clean fingernails for a clockmaker when she saw him at church that morning. That young men who work with gears and oil always have some trace under their nails, unless they've scrubbed them very, very thoroughly. The suspects emerge. By evening, both detectives have identified the small circle of people close enough to Alaric Venn to be considered suspects. First, there's Sir Edmund Whitby himself, the magistrate who summoned Poirot. At 55, Sir Edmund cuts a distinguished figure with his silver hair and aristocratic bearing. He's been the patron of Greythorne for decades, generous with his wealth, beloved by the villagers. But Poirot learned something interesting from the local bank manager. Sir Edmund is bankrupt. Gambling debts have eaten through the Whitby fortune like moths through velvet. He owes money to half of Yorkshire, and the largest debt? To Alaric Venn, who had loaned him £1,500 3 years ago, a loan that came due this very week. Then there's Lady Eleanor Whitby, Sir Edmund's wife. She's 30 years his junior, a pale beauty with haunted eyes and a voice like wind through willows. She's deeply religious, attends services twice on Sundays, does charity work among the poor. Miss Marple observes her at evening prayer and notices something curious. Eleanor won't look at the clock tower. She keeps her eyes downcast, her hands trembling as she clutches her prayer book. And when the organist mentions how sad about Mr. Van, Eleanor goes white as paper. Later, Miss Marple learns why. In Ven's workshop, hidden behind a velvet drapery, is a mural he painted years ago called The Clock of Angels. When Sir Edmund pulls back the curtain for Poirot to examine, they see an exquisite work. Angels dancing around a celestial clock, and at the center, her face rendered with loving detail, Eleanor Whitby. Rumor has it that Eleanor sat for Venn when she first came to Greythorne as a young bride. Some whisper the sessions lasted longer than necessary. Some say Venn never stopped loving her. Then there's Thomas Hale, the apprentice. He's 23, thin and nervous, with ink-stained fingers and a perpetual look of worry. He'd been Ven's apprentice for 5 years, learning the clockmaker's art, hoping one day to inherit the workshop. But Venn had recently told several people that Thomas lacked the proper temperament for fine work. He was too impulsive, too emotional. Venn had even considered taking on a new apprentice, a prospect that would have destroyed Thomas's future. Thomas claims he left the workshop at 11:15 that night, dismissed early by his master, who said he wanted to work alone. But those unusually clean fingernails troubled Miss Marple. What was Thomas trying to wash away? Mrs. Agatha Tressel, the postmistress, cannot be overlooked either. At 52, she's a ruddy-cheeked woman with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. She knows everyone's business because she handles everyone's mail. Nothing happens in Greythorne without Mrs. Tressel knowing about it. Her late husband, Arthur Tressel, had been Ven's apprentice decades ago before Thomas. But Venn had dismissed him, accusing him of theft. A pocket watch had gone missing, and though nothing was ever proven, Arthur Tressel's reputation was ruined. He drank himself to death within 5 years. Mrs. Tressel has never forgiven Venn for that, and, curiously, she was seen near the clock tower at 1:15 midnight that night. She claimed she was looking for her cat, but Miss Marple wonders, was she looking for something else entirely? Finally, there's Dr. Leonard Bexley, the village physician beloved and trusted, who declared Venn's death entirely natural. He's a handsome man in his 40s, always impeccably dressed, with a gentle bedside manner that puts patients at ease. Dr. Bexley has been Sir Edmund's personal physician for years. He's also his closest friend, his confidant, the man who knows all the Whitby family secrets. Poirot notices that Sir Edmund seems almost dependent on the doctor's approval, looking to him before making any decision. And Miss Marple learns something interesting from the grocer's wife. Dr. Bexley hates the sound of ticking clocks. He's mentioned it several times, how the constant tick-tick-tick keeps him awake at night, how he finds it maddening. Strange, isn't it, for a man who must take pulses all day long? Part 2. The investigation deepens. Poirot's method. Poirot begins his investigation, as he always does, with method and precision. He establishes a timeline. He interviews witnesses. He measures photographs and catalogs every piece of evidence. He learns that Alaric Venn died, according to Dr. Bexley, between midnight and 12:30. The stop clocks support this, 12:03 a.m., but Poirot is suspicious. The coroner's report, hastily filed by Dr. Bexley himself, lists cause of death as myocardial infarction, a heart attack, natural causes. But natural deaths don't require such careful staging. Poirot examines a screwdriver with the blood and oil. He has it tested. The blood is indeed Venn's, matching the wound on his hand. But there's something else in the oil, something unusual. A chemical analysis reveals traces of a substance used for polishing antique brass, a specific tincture that's quite rare, imported from France. Who in Greythorne uses such expensive polish? Poirot also studies the stop clocks throughout the village with obsessive interest. He visits home after home, examining each frozen timepiece. Mrs. Tressel's mantel clock, Sir Edmund's pocket watch, the church bell mechanism, young Thomas's wristwatch. And he discovers something remarkable. These clocks aren't all mechanically connected. There are no wires running between houses. So, how did they all stop at the same moment? The answer lies in maintenance records. Poirot discovers that most of the village clocks were maintained on a shared schedule, and who handled the winding and servicing. Not Alaric Venn, whose arthritis had grown worse in recent months. No, the person who had access to nearly every clock in Greythorne, who wound them weekly, who could have synchronized them all, was Dr. Leonard Bexley. The good doctor had taken on this charitable duty 2 years ago, claiming he wanted to help the aging clockmaker. How thoughtful, how convenient. Poirot returns to Venn's workshop late one evening. Alone, he moves through the space in the lamplight, seeing it not as it is now, but as it was that fatal night. He sits in Venn's chair. He imagines drinking tea with a visitor. He imagines a conversation, the tension, the sudden pain. Then he notices something. Faint grooves in the wooden floorboards. The marks of a chair being moved hastily back and forth. Someone sat across from Venn, someone who shifted nervously, repeatedly, wearing down the wood over time. Poirot measures the distance and angle. He calculates the height and weight of the person who sat there. Not a large person, not particularly heavy. Someone of medium build who visited regularly enough to leave these marks. Beneath Venn's desk, hidden in shadow, Poirot finds something that makes him go very still. Another pocket watch. Its casing is identical to one found on Venn's body, but when Poirot opens it, the hands are stopped at a different time, 11:45 p.m., 1 clock too many. Poirot murmurs to himself in French, his eyes gleaming with understanding. The solution is beginning to take shape in his mind, like a clock mechanism assembling itself gear by gear. Miss Marple's method. While Poirot investigates with scientific precision, Miss Marple takes tea with murderers. She attends every social gathering in Greythorne over the next few days. The memorial service for Alaric Venn, the parish council meeting, the Women's Institute luncheon. Everywhere people gather, Miss Marple is there, knitting quietly, listening intently. She has tea with Lady Eleanor, and learns that the young woman is terrified of something or someone. Eleanor's hands shake when she pours, and she jumps at every sound. She mentions receiving anonymous letters recently, though she won't say what they contained. Love letters? Threats? She won't elaborate. Miss Marple notes that Eleanor wears a locket that never leaves her neck. Inside, she glimpses a small key before Eleanor snaps it shut. Miss Marple also befriends Mrs. Trestle, which is no easy feat. The postmistress is suspicious of strangers and guards her secrets jealously. But Miss Marple mentions that she knew a postmistress in St. Mary Mead who had the same problem with a meddling vicar, and suddenly Mrs. Trestle is pouring out her grievances like wine from a bottle. She admits she was near the clock tower that night, not looking for her cat at all. That was a lie. She was spying on someone, though she won't say who. She saw things that night, heard things, but if she tells what she knows, it will destroy someone's reputation, and Mrs. Trestle isn't sure she wants that responsibility. Miss Marple assures her that the truth always comes out eventually. Better to speak it now than have it dragged out painfully later. Most tellingly, Miss Marple spends time with Dr. Bexley. She feigns a dizzy spell at the post office one morning, and the good doctor is immediately at her side, all concern and gentle competence. He insists on escorting her back to the rectory and examining her thoroughly. As he checks her pulse, Miss Marple notices his hands. Steady as stone. Not a tremor, not a shake. The hands of a surgeon, she thinks. The hands of someone who could administer poison with perfect precision and never betray a moment's hesitation. She mentions, quite casually, that she has trouble sleeping because of the ticking of her travel clock. Dr. Bexley's face changes for just an instant, a flicker of something dark and disturbed. "I quite understand," he says quietly. "The ticking can be maddening. Sometimes I think about a world without clocks altogether, without time measuring out our guilt moment by moment." An odd thing to say. Miss Marple files it away. She also learns, through careful inquiry with the rector, that Dr. Bexley has been called upon several times to sign death certificates for Sir Edmund's estate matters. Servants who died, tenants who pass away. Always Dr. Bexley's signature. Always ruling natural causes. Always convenient timing for the Whitby finances. How many of those deaths were truly natural? Miss Marple wonders. The red herrings. As the investigation progresses, suspicion swings wildly from suspect to suspect, each revelation seeming to point the finger at someone new. First, Thomas Hale falls under serious suspicion when Poirot discovers he stole from his master. The young apprentice had taken a valuable timepiece, an ornate gold watch commissioned by a London collector, and pawned it in York to pay gambling debts. When confronted, Thomas breaks down weeping, confessing everything. But Poirot has the screwdriver tested. The blood doesn't match Thomas's type. The young man is guilty of theft but innocent of murder. Then attention turns sharply to Sir Edmund Whitby. Poirot uncovers the true depth of his financial ruin. He's not just bankrupt, he's ruined. The estate will be sold, the title meaningless without land or money to support it. And the bankruptcy hearing is scheduled for the day after Venn's death. With Venn dead, the largest debt is erased from the books. Conveniently, Dr. Bexley has ruled it natural causes, so there's no hold on his estate. Sir Edmund can proceed with restructuring his remaining debts. Miss Marple recalls a similar case in St. Mary Mead, where a husband poisoned his creditor's tea by courtesy rather than cruelty. The wives had been friends, you see, and he'd been invited for tea. So civilized, so British, so absolutely lethal. But when Poirot has the remaining tea from Ven's pot analyzed, there's no poison. None at all. Sir Edmund may be bankrupt, but he's not a murderer. The romantic angle gains traction next. The mural of Eleanor is too beautiful, too loving to be merely artistic. Van had been a widower for 20 years. Eleanor has been trapped in a loveless marriage to a much older man. Had they rekindled something? Had Sir Edmund discovered the affair and killed Van in a rage, staging it to look like a heart attack? Or had Eleanor herself done it, silencing Van before he could expose their affair? Those anonymous letters she received, had they been from Van, threatening to reveal everything? But Miss Marple, with her deep understanding of human nature, sees the truth. Eleanor loved Van, yes, but as a daughter loves a kind uncle. The mural was painted years ago, when she was young and lonely, and Van had been a gentle presence in her difficult life. There was affection, but nothing improper. Eleanor's fear comes from something else entirely. She knows something about her husband and Dr. Bexley, something dangerous, and she's terrified of speaking up. The turning point. The investigation reaches a critical moment when Poirot and Miss Marple, quite by accident, compare notes over tea at the rectory. Poirot mentions a rare French brass polish found on the screwdriver. Miss Marple mentions Dr. Bexley's hatred of ticking clocks. Poirot describes a second pocket watch with its different time. Miss Marple recalls the doctor's steady hands and odd comment about guilt being measured moment by moment. And suddenly, like two parts of a mechanism clicking into place, they see it. The pattern, the method, the motive, the clocks, Poirot says slowly. They did not stop by accident or by Ven's dying action. They were stopped deliberately, Miss Marple continues, to hide the true time of death, by someone who had access to every timepiece in the village, by someone who could declare the death natural without question, by someone who needed to protect not his own secrets, but someone else's. They speak almost in unison. Dr. Bexley. But why? What was the motive? Poirot returns to his room and reviews all his notes. He examines the death certificates Dr. Bexley has signed over the past 3 years. He notices patterns, dates that align suspiciously with Sir Edmund's debt payments, inheritances that happen to come through when the Whitby finances were most desperate. And then Poirot finds it. A death certificate for Agnes Morehouse, a wealthy widow who left her entire estate to Sir Edmund Whitby, her distant cousin. She died of heart failure, according to Dr. Bexley, on March 15, 1933. Quite sudden, quite convenient. But Alaric Venn had repaired her clock the week before she died. And meticulous clockmaker that he was, Venn kept detailed records of his house calls. In his notes about Mrs. Morehouse's visit, he'd written, "Lady in excellent health and spirits. Showed me her new will. Everything to the church mission. Doctor be most displeased." Van had discovered the truth. Dr. Bexley had been falsifying death certificates for years, helping Sir Edmund inherit money through suspicious deaths. Agnes Morehouse was just one of several. The doctor would diagnose terminal illness, encourage patients to settle their affairs, suggest Sir Edmund as a trustworthy executor. Then, at the opportune moment, a little something in the tea, a gentle dose of digitalis, and another heart attack. So unfortunate, so natural. And Alaric Venn, with his clockmaker's precision and his rigid sense of morality, had pieced it together. The dates, the deaths, the money. He'd told someone he was going to expose it all at Sir Edmund's bankruptcy hearing, where such matters would be examined closely. That someone had been Dr. Bexley himself. Miss Marple, meanwhile, has been thinking about the two teacups. Who drinks tea at midnight with their doctor? Someone who's received an unexpected house call. Someone who's been convinced they need urgent medical attention. She interviews a young boy who delivers newspapers, and he remembers seeing Dr. Bexley's motor car parked near the workshop around 11:30 that night. The doctor had told him he was checking on Mr. Venn, who'd sent a message about chest pains. But Venn had sent no such message. Dr. Bexley had fabricated the emergency to gain entry late at night, when no one would witness his visit. The evidence mounts. Working separately but in parallel, Poirot and Miss Marple gather the final pieces of evidence. Poirot discovers that Dr. Bexley had indeed been winding and maintaining most of the village clocks, but not out of charity. He'd been preparing. Over the course of 2 years, he'd synchronized them to Venn's master clock mechanism, the device the clockmaker had been building to coordinate the village bell system. All Dr. Bexley needed to do was trigger the master clock, and every connected timepiece would stop simultaneously. The perfect alibi. If every clock stopped at 12:03, then Venn must have died at 12:03. Except he didn't. He died at 11:45, shortly after Dr. Bexley's arrival. The second pocket watch Poirot found beneath the desk was Venn's real watch, stopped at the actual time of death. Dr. Bexley had switched it with his own watch, which he'd manually set to 12:03 and then stopped. A sleight of hand that would fool everyone, unless someone thought to look very, very carefully. Miss Marple uncovers the method of murder through pharmaceutical records. Dr. Bexley had been prescribing increasing amounts of digitalis, a heart medication derived from foxglove. But when Miss Marple checks with his patients, easy enough for a sweet old lady making friendly visits, none of them are actually taking digitalis. The prescriptions are being filled, but the medicine isn't going to patients. Where is it going? Into Dr. Bexley's medical bag, accumulated dose by dose, until he has enough to kill with a single cup of tea. Digitalis in a sufficient dose causes heart failure. It's detectable in an autopsy, but only if someone thinks to look for it. And if the doctor performing the death examination is the same person who administered the poison, well, he's certainly not going to order those tests. The oil stain on Venn's waistcoat, which Poirot had analyzed, also contains traces of digitalis. Venn had spilled some of his poisoned tea on himself in his death throes. But Dr. Bexley, in his arrogance, had assumed the tea would be discarded and never tested. Finally, there's a lock of golden hair jammed in the brass clock mechanism. Poirot has it analyzed. It's not human hair at all. It's horsehair, used in certain clock pendulums. But why was it jammed into this particular clock? As a message? A warning? Miss Marple solved this puzzle through her understanding of symbolism. The clock with the jammed hair is positioned to face Eleanor's mural. Venn had jammed it deliberately before his visitor arrived as a message. He'd been warning Eleanor. Time has stopped for your angel. Danger is coming. He'd known someone was going to kill him. He'd known it was about the falsified death certificates. But he couldn't have known it would be that very night, or he would have gone Sir Edmund immediately instead of working late alone. Unless he did go to someone. Unless he went to the one person he thought could stop it. Unless he confronted Dr. Bexley himself earlier that day, giving the doctor notice that he would reveal everything at tomorrow's hearing unless the doctor confessed. Venn had given Bexley until midnight. The clockmaker's sense of dramatic timing had been his undoing. Part 3, The Revelation, Gathering the Suspects. 3 days after murder, Poirot sends a message to all the principals. They are requested to gather at Sir Edmund's drawing room that evening at 8 o'clock. It's time for the truth to emerge. They come reluctantly, nervously, knowing that an accusation is coming but not knowing where it will fall. Sir Edmund sits by the fire, looking older than his years, his hands trembling slightly. Lady Eleanor sits apart from him, pale and quiet. Thomas Hale stands by the window, unable to sit still. Mrs. Tressel perches on the edge of a chair, her sharp eyes darting from face to face. And Dr. Bexley stands with his back to the mantelpiece, the picture of professional composure, though his hands are clasped tightly behind his back. Miss Marple sits in a corner with her knitting, looking for all the world like someone's maiden aunt who's wandered into the wrong room. Poirot stands before them all, his hands folded, his magnificent mustaches perfectly waxed. He begins to speak. Poirot's explanation. Messieurs et Madame. Poirot begins in precise accented English. The village of Greythorne did not lose its time by accident. It was murder by precision. He pauses, letting the words sink in. When I arrived in this village, I was told that Alaric Venn had died of natural causes. A heart attack. The coroner, Dr. Bexley, had examined the body and declared it so. And why should we doubt him? He is a respected physician, a trusted member of this community. And yet, Poirot pulls out the second pocket watch, holding it up to the lamplight. And yet, why did Monsieur Venn carry 2 watches? This one I found hidden beneath his desk, stopped at 11:45. The one found on his body stopped at 12:03. The same timepiece, yes, but showing different moments. How can this be? Dr. Bexley shifts slightly. Perhaps he collected watches. Many clockmakers do. Perhaps, Poirot agrees. But there is more. You see, I have learned that nearly every clock in Greythorne was wound and maintained by the same helpful person over the past 2 years. The same person who had access to the master clock mechanism Alaric Venn was building. The same person who could, with one pull of a lever, stop every synchronized timepiece at once. He turns to Dr. Bexley. You, Monsieur le Docteur. A murmur runs through the room. Dr. Bexley's face remains calm, but his knuckles whiten. This is absurd, he says smoothly. I helped maintain the clocks as a courtesy to Alaric. His arthritis had become severe. Are you suggesting I killed him because I wound his clocks? No, Poirot says quietly. I am suggesting you killed him because he discovered your other work. The death certificates you falsified. The wealthy patients who died so conveniently. The inheritances that always seem to benefit your dear friend, Sir Edmund Whitby. Sir Edmund stands abruptly. What? Leonard, what is he talking about? But Poirot continues, relentless as time itself. Alaric Venn was a meticulous man. He kept records of everything. He repaired clocks in the homes of many people, including Agnes Morehouse, who died suddenly of a heart attack 2 years ago. But Venn noted in his ledger that Mrs. Morehouse was in excellent health. She showed him her new will, everything left to the church mission. Yet somehow she died a week later, and Sir Edmund inherited her entire estate. Poirot produces a sheaf of papers. I have examined every death certificate you signed in the past 5 years, Dr. Bexley. 7 suspicious deaths. 7 convenient inheritances. 7 times you declared natural causes when the circumstances demanded investigation. And Alaric Venn had discovered this pattern. He was going to expose you at the bankruptcy hearing. Miss Marple speaks. Miss Marple sets down her knitting and speaks for the first time, her voice gentle but firm. The question that troubled me, you see, was the tea. Who visits someone at midnight and drinks tea? But if the visitor was a doctor, claiming there'd been a message about chest pains, then of course Mr. Venn would let him in. Of course he'd offer tea while the doctor examined him. She looks directly at Dr. Bexley with her clear blue eyes. You arrived at 11:30, didn't you? The newspaper boys saw your motor car. You told Mr. Venn you received an urgent message about his heart. He let you in because he trusted you. You sat across from him at his workbench. I found the grooves in the floor where your chair had worn the wood over many visits. You drank tea together, and you'd already put the digitalis in his cup. Dr. Bexley's composure begins to crack. This is speculation. You have no proof. Don't we? Poirot interjects. He holds up a small vial. The tea from that night was never discarded. I had it analyzed. Digitalis. Enough to kill a man within minutes. And your pharmacy records show you've been prescribing digitalis for patients who don't actually take it, building up your supply dose by dose. The mechanism of murder. Poirot walks to the center of the room, his hands gesturing as he reconstructs the crime. You sat with Alaric Venn and watched him die. He realized what you'd done. The horror in his eyes must have been terrible. He stumbled toward his workbench, trying to reach something, anything. He grasped the master clock mechanism and pulled the lever. Every clock in Greythorne stopped. Not at 12:03, as you had planned, but at that moment, approximately 11:48. But this would ruin your alibi. You needed people to believe Venn died after midnight, when you had witnesses placing you at home. So you worked quickly. You triggered the master clock mechanism again, resetting it to 12:03. You switched Venn's real pocket watch, stopped at the actual time of death, with your own watch, which you preset to 12:03. You arranged his hand in the gears to suggest a workshop accident. You positioned everything with medical precision. Poirot's voice drops. But you made one mistake. You forgot that clockmakers are as precise as doctors. Venn had hidden his real watch beneath the desk before you arrived. Perhaps he suspected you might try something. Perhaps he wanted evidence to remain. Either way, you never found it. One clock too many, monsieur. And that one clock has condemned you. The confession. Dr. Bexley stands very still, his face pale. For a long moment, he says nothing. Then, slowly, he begins to laugh, a terrible, hollow sound. Do you know what it's like, he says quietly, to hear clocks ticking every moment of every day? Tick, 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 measuring out your guilt second by second? I thought if I could stop them all, just for one moment, I could stop time itself. Stop the guilt. Stop the memories of all those faces. Agnes Morehouse, old Thomas Granger, Margaret Pemberton. All of them trusted me right up until the end. Sir Edmund staggers back as if struck. Leonard, my God, what have you done? Did you kill them all? For me. Mrs. Tressel perches on the edge of a chair, her sharp eyes darting from face to face. And Dr. Bexley stands with his back to the mantelpiece, the picture of professional composure, though his hands are clasped tightly behind his back. Miss Marple sits in a corner with her knitting, looking for all the world like someone's maiden aunt who's wandered into the wrong room. Poirot stands before them all, his hands folded, his magnificent mustaches perfectly waxed. He begins to speak. Poirot's explanation. Messrs. et Madame. Poirot begins in precise, accented English. The village of Greythorne did not lose its time by accident. It was murdered by precision. He pauses, letting the words sink in. When I arrived in this village, I was told that Alaric Venn had died of natural causes. A heart attack. The coroner, Dr. Bexley, had examined the body and declared it so. And why should we doubt him? He is a respected physician, a trusted member of this community. And yet, Poirot pulls out the second pocket watch, holding up to the lamplight. And yet, why did Monsieur Venn carry two watches? This one I found hidden beneath his desk, stopped at 11:45. The one found on his body stopped at 12:03. The same timepiece, yes, but showing different moments. How can this be? Dr. Bexley shifts slightly. Perhaps he collected watches. Many clockmakers do. Perhaps, Poirot agrees. But there is more. You see, I have learned that nearly every clock in Greythorne was wound and maintained by the same helpful person over the past 2 years. The same person who had access to the master clock mechanism Alaric Venn was building. The same person who could, with one pull of the lever, stop every synchronized timepiece at once. He turns to Dr. Bexley. You, Monsieur le Docteur. A murmur runs through the room. Dr. Bexley's face remains calm, but his knuckles whiten. This is absurd, he says smoothly. I helped maintain the clocks as a courtesy to Alaric. His arthritis had become severe. Are you suggesting I killed him because I wound his clocks? No, Poirot says quietly. I am suggesting you killed him because he discovered your other work, the death certificates you falsified, the wealthy patients who died so conveniently, the inheritances that always seemed to benefit your dear friend, Sir Edmund Whitby. Sir Edmund stands abruptly. What? Leonard, what is he talking about? But Poirot continues, relentless as time itself. Alaric Venn was a meticulous man. He kept records of everything. He repaired clocks in the homes of many people, including Agnes Morehouse, who died suddenly of a heart attack 2 years ago. But Venn noted in his ledger that Mrs. Morehouse was in excellent health. She showed him her new will, everything left to the church mission. Yet somehow she died a week later, and Sir Edmund inherited her entire estate. Poirot produces a sheaf of papers. I have examined every death certificate you signed in the past 5 years. Dr. Bexley, 7 suspicious deaths, 7 convenient inheritances, 7 times you declared natural causes when the circumstances demanded investigation. And Alaric Venn had discovered this pattern. He was going to expose you at the bankruptcy hearing. Miss Marple speaks. Miss Marple sets down her knitting and speaks for the first time, her voice gentle but firm. The question that troubled me, you see, was the tea. Who visits someone at midnight and drinks tea? But if the visitor was a doctor, claiming there'd been a message about chest pains, then of course Mr. Venn would let him in. Of course he'd offer tea while the doctor examined him. She looks directly at Dr. Bexley with her clear blue eyes. You arrived at 11:30, didn't you? The newspaper boys saw your motor car. You told Mr. Venn you received an urgent message about his heart. He let you in because he trusted you. You sat across from him at his workbench. I found the grooves in the floor where your chair had worn the wood over many visits. You drank tea together, and you'd already put the digitalis in his cup. Dr. Bexley's composure begins to crack. This is speculation. You have no proof. Don't we? Poirot interjects. He holds up a small vial. The tea from that night was never discarded. I had it analyzed. Digitalis. Enough to kill a man within minutes. And your pharmacy records show you've been prescribing digitalis for patients who don't actually take it, building up your supply dose by dose. The mechanism of murder. Poirot walks to the center of the room, his hands gesturing as he reconstructs the crime. You sat with Alaric Venn and watched him die. He realized what you'd done. The horror in his eyes must have been terrible. He stumbled toward his workbench, trying to reach something, anything. He grasped the master clock mechanism and pulled the lever. Every clock in Greythorne stopped. Not at 12:03, as you had planned, but at that moment, approximately 11:48. But this would ruin your alibi. You needed people to believe Venn died after midnight, when you had witnesses placing you at home. So you worked quickly. You triggered the master clock mechanism again, resetting it to 12:03. You switched Venn's real pocket watch, stopped at the actual time of death, with your own watch, which you preset to 12:03. You arranged his hand in the gears to suggest a workshop accident. You positioned everything with medical precision. Poirot's voice drops. But you made one mistake. You forgot that clockmakers are as precise as doctors. Venn had hidden his real watch beneath the desk before you arrived. Perhaps he suspected you might try something. Perhaps he wanted evidence to remain. Either way, you never found it. One clock too many, monsieur. And that one clock has condemned you. The confession. Dr. Bexley stands very still, his face pale. For a long moment, he says nothing. Then, slowly, he begins to laugh, a terrible, hollow sound. Do you know what it's like, he says quietly, to hear clocks ticking every moment of every day? Tick, 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 measuring out your guilt second by second? I thought if I could stop them all, just for one moment, I could stop time itself, stop the guilt, stop the memories of all those faces. Agnes Morehouse, old Thomas Granger, Margaret Pemberton, all of them trusting me right up until the end. Sir Edmund staggers back as if struck. Leonard, my God, what have you done? Did you kill them all? For me? Not for you, Bexley says bitterly. For your friendship. You were the only person who ever valued me. Edmund, the only one who treated me as an equal, not just as the local doctor. When you came to me desperate, drowning in debt, what else could I do? I had the knowledge. I had the access. It was so easy. A little digitalis in the tea. A gentle diagnosis of heart failure. No one questioned the trusted doctor. He looks at Poirot with something like respect. But Venn questioned. Venn noticed. He came to me that afternoon and told me he knew everything. He gave me until midnight to confess, or he'd go to the magistrate himself. He actually believed I'd do the right thing. The fool. So you went to him that night, Miss Marple says softly. I told him I needed to examine him first, to make sure his heart could withstand the stress of the hearing. He believed me. He trusted me. We sat and drank tea, and we talked about time, about how it heals all wounds, measures all guilt. And then I watched his face change as the poison took hold, watched him realize what I'd done. Dr. Bexley closes his eyes. He tried to stop all the clocks. I think he believed if time stopped, I couldn't hurt anyone else. As if freezing that moment would freeze my guilt forever. Poetic, really, for a clockmaker. The arrest. Poirot nods to the doorway, where two police constables have been waiting throughout the confession. They step forward, and Dr. Bexley offers no resistance as they place him in handcuffs. As they lead him away, he pauses at the door and looks back at the room. I stopped the clocks, he says, so that moment would never strike again. So midnight would never remember. But time doesn't forgive, does it? It just keeps ticking. Tick, tick, tick. And he's gone. The room sits in stunned silence. Sir Edmund has collapsed into a chair, his face buried in his hands. Lady Eleanor goes to him, hesitantly placing a hand on his shoulder. Whatever secrets lay between them can be dealt with later. For now, there's only grief and shock. Thomas Hale stares at the empty doorway. He seems so kind. He bandaged my hand once when I cut on a gear. He was so gentle. Evil often is, Miss Marple says quietly. That's what makes it so dangerous. Mrs. Tressel, for once, has nothing to say. She simply sits, looking older than before. Part 4, The Aftermath. The next morning. Dawn breaks over Greythorne with a different quality now. The village feels lighter somehow, as if a weight has been lifted. Throughout the night, the clocks have been repaired, reset, wound. Time has returned to Greythorne. At precisely 6 a.m, the church bell tolls for the first time since the murder. The sound rings clear and true across the moors. In homes throughout the village, people pause in their morning routines to listen. Some weep, some smile. All feel a sense of something restored. In the rectory garden, Hercule Poirot and Miss Jane Marple take breakfast tea together. The autumn sun slants through the oak trees, and somewhere a bird is singing. "It was well done, Monsieur Poirot," Miss Marple says, pouring tea with steady hands. "The evidence you gathered was impeccable, and your understanding of human nature, mademoiselle, was invaluable." Poirot responds with a small bow. "I could deduce the how, but you understood the why." They sit in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the ticking of the rectory clock in the hallway. "It's curious," Miss Marple muses, "how Dr. Bexley thought he could stop time, as if one could freeze a moment and live in it forever, avoiding consequence. But time is relentless, isn't it? It catches us all eventually." "C'est vrai," Poirot agrees. "Time, like justice, waits for no one. It simply is. And we must live within it moment by moment, choosing right or wrong with each tick of the clock." The village moves on. In the following days, Greythorne slowly returns to normal, though it will never be quite the same. Sir Edmund resigns as magistrate, the weight of his indirect guilt too much to bear. While he didn't commit murder himself, his financial recklessness created the circumstances that drove Dr. Bexley to kill. He and Eleanor sell the estate and move to a small cottage in Cornwall, where they attempt to rebuild their marriage on honesty rather than secrets. Thomas Hale inherits the clockmaker's workshop, as Venns was specified. Despite his mistakes, the old man had believed in the boy's potential. Thomas vows to honor his master's legacy, and in time, he becomes a fine clockmaker himself. He never steals again. Mrs. Tressel remains postmistress, still sharp-tongued, still knowing everyone's business. But she's quieter now, more thoughtful. She's learned that some secrets are too terrible to gossip about. The Clock of Angels mural is restored and displayed in the village hall, a memorial to Alaric Venn. Eleanor's face gazes out from the canvas, forever young, forever innocent, a reminder that art preserves beauty even when time destroys it. Poirot and Marple depart. On the morning of the third day, Poirot prepares to return to London. His work here is done. The little gray cells have solved another puzzle, restored order from chaos. Miss Marple will stay a few more days with her niece, though the quiet country visit she planned is quite over. At the railway station, they meet one final time. The station clock shows 10:15, perfectly accurate now, perfectly on time. "Will we meet again, mademoiselle?" Poirot asks. Miss Marple smiles. "Perhaps, though I hope the circumstances will be less dire. Indeed, but if murder should occur, there is no one I would rather have as a—what is the word? A colleague, a fellow seeker of truth, Miss Marple suggests. Precisement. Poirot boards his train. As it pulls away from the platform, he looks back to see Miss Marple still standing there, a small figure with her knitting bag, waving farewell. Two different detectives, two different methods, but the same unwavering dedication to justice. The clock tower. That evening, as the sun sets over Greythorne, the church bell tower chimes 6 o'clock. The sound carries across the village, across the moors, out to the grey sea beyond. In his cell, Dr. Leonard Bexley hears it through the prison walls. Tick, 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 the sound he tried to silence forever. The sound that measures his remaining time, day by day, hour by hour, until justice is complete. In the workshop, Thomas Hale winds the last of the repaired clocks and sets it carefully on a shelf. Every timepiece shows a different hour, just as his master preferred. A symphony of ticking, each voice distinct, each moment measured. And in the rectory, Miss Marple sits by the window with her knitting, watching the clock tower against the darkening sky. She thinks about time and guilt, about secrets and justice, about how truth always emerges eventually, no matter how carefully it's hidden. The clock chimes again. 7 times. Clear and perfect. Time has returned to Greythorne. Epilogue. Midnight remembers. 6 months later, on a cold spring night, the church bell tolls midnight over Greythorne. 12 clear, solemn notes. In London, Hercule Poirot sets down his cocoa and checks his pocket watch. Precisely midnight. He thinks of a village where time once stopped, and a clockmaker who died trying to expose evil. In St. Mary Mead, Miss Marple hears her own clock chime and thinks of the same village, the same man, the same lesson. That evil often wears a mask of kindness, but time reveals all faces eventually. In prison, Dr. Leonard Bexley lies awake, listening to the clock in the corridor. Tick, tick, tick. He tried to stop time to escape his guilt, but time is patient. Time is relentless. Time remembers everything. And in Greythorne, in the workshop at the edge of the village, all the clocks tick in their different rhythms. None show the same hour. All measure time in their own way, but they all agree on one thing. It is now, this moment, this single point where past and future meet. And in this moment, justice has been served. The clockmaker's ghost, if such things exist, can rest. The clocks remember. Midnight remembers. And Greythorne sleeps peacefully, knowing that even when evil tries to stop time, there are those who will set it right again. Tick, tick, tick. Time moves on. Closing thoughts. The Clockwork Murder is a story about time itself, how we try to control it, escape it, or freeze it at the perfect moment before everything falls apart. Dr. Bexley thought he could stop the clocks and stop his guilt. Alaric then tried to use time as a weapon, giving his killer until midnight to confess. The village lived suspended in that stop moment, frozen at 12:03, unable to move forward until the truth emerged. But as Poirot and Miss Marple both understand, time is the one thing that cannot be controlled. It moves forward relentlessly, measuring our choices, recording our actions, waiting patiently for truth to emerge. You can stop every clock in the world, but you cannot stop time itself. And when murder is committed, when evil tries to hide itself, time becomes a detective's ally. Every minute leaves traces. Every second creates evidence. The killer may try to manipulate clocks and schedules, but they cannot change what actually happened. They cannot rewrite the moment of death. In the end, the stop clocks of Greythorne told the truth more eloquently than any witness. They reveal the precise mechanism of murder, the careful planning, the arrogant assumption that time itself could be fooled. But time cannot be fooled. It simply waits for the clever detective to read its message correctly. This is why Hercule Poirot, with her precise methods and timetables, and Miss Jane Marple, with her patient observation and understanding of human nature, make such perfect investigators. They both understand that time is always on the side of truth. The guilty may run, hide, or lie. They may stop every clock in the village. But time remembers everything. And eventually midnight strikes again. The end. And that brings us to the end of the clockmaker's shadows. What a story this has been. The quiet village of Greythorne, the ticking silence of stopped clocks, and the chilling realization that time itself can become an accomplice to murder. Yet beneath all the mystery and precision of gears and pendulums lies something even darker. The human heart and its desperate need to control what it cannot. So, my dear listeners, what do you make of it all? Did you sense the truth before Poirot and Miss Marple laid it bare? When every clock froze at midnight, who did you suspect first? The nervous apprentice, the elegant lady with secrets in her eyes, or perhaps the kindly doctor who always seemed to know too much? Tell me in the comments below. I love reading your theories, and sometimes your guesses are as sharp as Poirot's own little gray cells. And if this story stirred your imagination, then you must subscribe to Whispering Ages. Each week, we travel deeper into forgotten crimes and unsolved whispers, where reason meets intuition and where every clue hides behind the ordinary. Your support, your presence, and your curiosity are what keep these stories alive. Share this episode with a friend who loves mysteries, someone who enjoys curling up with a warm cup of tea and losing themselves in the fog of an unsolved crime. Invite them to join our growing circle of listeners who see what others overlook. But before you go, think on this. How much of time do we truly own? For Alaric Venn, the clockmaker Greythorne, time was his craft. Yet it was also his downfall. He believed he could master it, stop it, bend it. But as Miss Marple wisely reminds us, time does not forgive. It simply waits. Perhaps that's the real mystery, isn't it? That no matter how carefully we arrange the hours, how precisely we set our clocks, fate still ticks according to its own design. So as you step away from this tale tonight, listen closely to the soft ticking in the distance, to the whispers of moments long gone. They remind us that every second carries a story, some solved, some forgotten, and some still waiting to be told. And if you wish to hear those stories, the ones that linger in the dark corners of time, then stay with us. Subscribe, comment, and let me know what mysteries you'd like to see unfold next. Until our next case, dear listener, keep your clocks wound, your mind sharp, and your heart steady, because in the world of whispering ages, even silence has a story to tell.